Welcome to the presentation on ICT for Education, Successful Integration with All Education Resources. Today we will be looking at what is necessary and should be in place for ICT integration to be successful in the education system. We will also look at how OERs can help to make this presentation a success. In most developing countries, governments and education institutions make huge investments in ICT tools and infrastructure. These tools include laptops, computers, tablets, projectors, whiteboards, internet access, Wi-Fi access, radio, television, cell phones, and printers. The hope is these investments will improve the quality of teaching and learning. Learners have different learning styles, and educational institutions have realized that the old way of teaching all their students the same way has to change. The method of one size fits all has not catered for all learners, leading to school dropouts and other social problems. However, investing in ICT creates some challenges for governments, educators, stakeholders, policymakers, and learners in educational policy, planning, infrastructure, language and content, capacity building, and finance. Throughout this presentation, I will highlight the following. Why is ICT for education? Why ICT integration is important, challenges of ICT integration, what are open education resources, OERs, benefits of OERs, phases of integration, what is required for a successful integration, and how can OERs assist with ICT integration. I will examine all of these points throughout this presentation. Let us begin by looking at what is ICT for education. ICT for education is a diverse set of technological tools and resources used to communicate and to create, disseminate, store, and manage information. ICT tools and the internet can be used to harness, improve the efficiency and effectiveness of education at all levels in both formal and non-formal settings. It is technology that is used to enhance learning. Teaching with technology is different than teaching in a typical classroom. Teachers must be trained in how to plan, create, and deliver instruction within a technological setting. It requires a different pedagogical approach. The teacher is no longer the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side. Why is ICT integration important? Firstly, it helps students acquire the skills they need to survive in a complex, highly technological, knowledge-based economy. We live in a global community taken over by technology. All learners require problem-solving and critical thinking skills to compete in this community. ICT integration also deepens and enhances the learning process. With ICT, learning is no longer confined to the four walls of a classroom. The world become the classroom. The world has become our classroom. There are countless resources in the online world which can provide each classroom with more interesting, diverse, and current learning materials. ICT changes the way teachers teach, offering educators effective ways to reach different types of learners and access students' understanding through multiple means. Teachers go into the role as advisors, content experts, and coach. Effective technology integration is achieved when the use of technology support curricular goals. ICT also helps to make teaching and learning more meaningful and fun. It supports 4 key components of learning: active engagement, participation in groups, frequent interaction and feedback, and connection to real-world experts. I will invite you to have a look at Shaping tech for the classroom, the 21st century skills needs 21st century school needs 21st century technology by Marcia Perkins. And this link will take you to that presentation. All right, we will now look at challenges of ICT integration. Successful integration will not be achieved overnight. Many institutions experience challenges that they need to overcome for success. These challenges to be considered include educational policy and planning, attempts to enhance and reform education through ICTs require clear and specific objectives, guidelines, and time-bound targets, the mobilization of required resources, and the political commitment at all levels to see the initiative through. Infrastructure. Before any ICT-based program is launched, policymakers and planners must carefully consider their infrastructural needs, appropriate rooms or buildings available to house the technology, the availability of electricity and telephony, of the ambiguity of different styles of ICT in the country and in the education system at all levels. For instance, a basic requirement for computer-based or online learning is access to computers in schools, communities, and households, as well as affordable internet service. Another challenge to be examined are the learning content and language. Content development is a critical area that is too often overlooked. There is a need to develop original educational content. Example, radio programs in interactive multimedia learning materials on CD-ROM or DVD, web-based courses, etc. Adapting existing content and convert print material content to digital media. Capacity building is also another area to be examined, is another challenge. Various competencies must be developed throughout the educational system for ICT integration to be successful. Teachers' anxiety over being replaced by technology or losing their authority in the classroom as the learning processes become more learner-centered and acknowledge barrier to ICT adoption can be alleviated only if teachers have a keen understanding and appreciation of their changing role. Administrators themselves must be competent in the use of technology, and they must have a broad understanding of technical, curricular, administrative, financial, and social dimensions of ICT use in education. Another challenge is financing. One of the greatest challenges of ICT use in education is balancing educational goals with economic realities. ICTs in education programs require large capital investment. The limited funds should be invested in tools that meet the needs of all learners and institutions. What are open education resources? Open education resources are freely accessible, open license documents and media that are useful for teaching, learning, educational assessment, and research purposes. The nature of these open materials means that anyone can legally and freely copy, use, adapt, and reshare them. The term OER has been used to refer to learning materials such as learning objects, quiz, crosswords, puzzles, flashcards, animation, interactive maps, timelines, etc. Open education resources also draws upon open technologies that facilitate collaborative, flexible learning and the open sharing of teaching practices that empower educators to benefit from the best ideas of their colleagues. The development and promotion of open education resources provide an alternate or enhanced educational paradigm. Benefits of open education resources, or OER. The benefits can be looked at from the perspective from three. The benefits of OER can be looked at from the perspective of the government, institutions, educators, and learners. From the government perspective, OER advance knowledge by unlocking information for the benefit of all, not only for those who can afford to access it. OER widen participation in higher education by expanding access to non-traditional learners, offering education to all, no matter their social class, gender, or abilities, catering for all, which benefits the human resource of any country. Promoting lifelong learning is another benefit of OER. Learning is continuous as things change. OER provide opportunities for persons to keep up to date with information. There is no restriction on who can access and when. OER makes learning lifelong from the cradle to the grave. Bridging the gap between formal and informal, non-formal, and reuse between institutions. Education is an expensive venture and is often not accessible by all. With OERs, government can provide training for all its citizens. Leveraging taxpayers' money by sharing and reuse of OERs between institutions, allowing taxpayers' money to benefit all or reach a wider set of individuals. Educational institution, from the education perspective, education should also share the benefits of OERs. Sharing and collaborating among institutions and countries, OER fosters and encourages collaboration and allows education institutions to share information and connect with others. Institutions can only work together to create new or adapt material and or software already created. The use of OERs can reduce the cost of education. Learners are always seeking affordable education. This may enhance the public image and attract new students. Improving, recruit, improving recruitment by helping the students find right programs. Increases enrollment by matching students to a program that suits their needs and abilities. OER provides a resource for students and faculty that all supports learning and collaboration, makes educational resources more affordable to enhance and support learning and teaching for both learners and facilitators. From the educator's perspective, personal, personal gains through increased reputation. Educators who create, develop, and promote OERs build a reputation among their colleagues. Fostering connection with colleagues around the world, collaboration with colleagues who are teaching the same levels and content to connect and share their best practices and encourage their learners to create and share with their peers around the world. From educators also benefit by preserving a record of teaching innovations, allowing others to build upon them. Opportunities to build on best practices. There is no need for educators to reinvent the wheel. They simply need to examine what is available and adapt to build to meet phases of integration. Mhm. Phases of integration. Institutions are at different stages of integration. There are four phases of ICT integration. A careful and full analysis of where you are would guide your planning, implementing, monitoring, supporting, and your evaluation process. The first phase is emerging. A school in this stage is beginning to develop its ICT. Administrators and educators are just starting to explore the possibilities and consequences of using ICT for school management and the curriculum. The school begins to purchase or has some equipment and software donated. In this initial phase, administrators and educators are just starting to explore their possibilities. Learners' access to technology is through individual educators. The school is still firmly grounded in traditional educational-centered practice. For example, educators lecture and provide content, while students listen, take notes, and are assessed on prescribed content. The school may be offering computer studies as a subject, but this is not necessarily a sign of whole school development with ICT. Applying is another phase of ICT integration, which describes the school in which new understanding of the contribution of ICTs to learning have developed. Administrators and educators use Administrators and educators use ICT for tasks already carried out in the school management and in the curriculum. Educators' lectures may be supplemented with ICT use, such as presentation programs and word processed handouts. Learners may listen to lectures and add notes to educators' prepared handouts. ICTs have been taught as a separate subject learning area. Professional development for staff focusing on how to integrate and use of ICT in curricular-related activities is being introduced. The emphasis is on educators teaching about computer and not learners learning with the computer. In the integrating phase, the school now has a range of technologies both in laboratories, classrooms, and administrative offices. Staff explores new ways in which ICT change their personal productivity and professional practices. The curriculum begins to merge subjects and areas to reflect real-world applications. Content is provided through multiple sources, including the community and global resources through the internet. Learners' access to technology enables them to choose projects and ICT tools to learn and demonstrate their knowledge across learning and subject areas. Learners have more choices with regard to learning styles and pathways. They take more responsibility for their own learning and assessment. Staff development and support in the integration of ICT continues throughout this stage. To advance to the next phase, the school chooses an ICT curriculum that allows a project-based ICT enhanced approach. Schools begin to involve the community in the learning environment, both as users and as resource providers. The final phase of ICT integration is the transforming phase. The school that uses ICT creatively to rethink and renew school organization. The focus of the curriculum is now learner-centered and integrates learning areas in real-world applications. This has only become possible because the educators have undergone training and support in ICT integration, and they have planned and implement new approaches to teaching and learning that include the use of ICT as a supporting tool. ICT becomes an integral, both visual part of the daily personal productivity and professional practice. Learners' access to technology is broad and unrestricted. They take more of responsibility for their learning and assessment. The school has become a center of learning for the community. We will now examine what is required for successful integration. We have looked at the importance of ICT, so now let's examine what is required for successful integration of ICT. An ICT SWOT analysis will help to identify the areas that need to change in order to implement ICT in your school. This is an approach of planning that looks at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses refer to the things inside your organization or school. You should seek to build on your strengths and address your weaknesses. Opportunities, opportunities and threats refer to things outside your school, in its context or environment. While you do not have direct control over these things, your plans need to take them into account. Where there is no vision, the people perish. An ICT vision, this is the starting point. There should be a vision for ICT. This must be a shared vision by all stakeholders. Right? All stakeholders must share this vision if there is going to be collaboration for successful integration. The next step to successfully integrate ICT is the ICT policy. The policy provides the guidelines and procedures for all to follow and also the consequences for not following the guidelines. It explains what is intended to happen and the process through which it will happen. In order for the ICT to implement a successful ICT program, there should also be a plan of action. The plan of action will work alongside the policy. It helps with setting targets and monitoring the progress of your target. It looks at what you have already achieved, are achieving, and still want to achieve at your school, as far as ICTs are concerned in your chosen area of priority. Implementation looks at how you plan to introduce ICT in your school. There should also be training. Training is needed to develop and enhance the skills of staff. This is an important aspect of ICT integration for success. Staff should be knowledgeable and equipped to guide learners effectively. There's also required to be monitoring. This is also a requirement of monitoring and support throughout the process. And also continuous evaluation is necessary to gauge the progress or failures that you may be experiencing through your integration. Now, how can OERs assist with the transformation of ICT? There are many open education resources available to assist institutions and other education stakeholders to transform their teaching learning environment. Assistance in policy, in creating policy, and we can examine a website where this is available. Right? The UNESCO website also provides guidance on writing an ICT policy for a school. That's one resource that's available. You can also look at an ICT development cycle, which is available from the SchoolNet network. We also provide, there's also resource materials, open education resource of material that's already available, right? That provides information on how you get started, also provide information transition to OER education resources that's available, right? Sharing of best practices, right? The UNESCO website, the UNESCO Bangkok website also provide links to best practices and lessons learned from institutions who have already integrated ICT in their curriculum and at their schools. That's another resource that's already available. Provide training for teachers and administrators. Commonwealth of Learning provides certification course for teachers in ICT integration. And these are open source. These are open source courses, right? They look at topics such as ICT in schools, ICT in the role of the educators, assessing ICT integration, ICT planning for school, and others. These are just some of the resources that are already available online. open source content online that can be accessed by institutions, right? We also have OAS and Intel also provide training and different professional development training for teachers using open education resources, right? You have designing blended learning, inquiry in the sense that these are just some of the options are already available using OER resources that can be used by schools or institutions geared to integrating technology in their classroom. All right. Now, to conclude out this presentation, I would invite you to have a look at those resources that were shown previously. There are many other OERs available from the UNESCO, OAS, SchoolNet, Intel, and Commonwealth of Learning that can offer guidance and support in making the transformation, right? That offer guidance and support in making the transformation to ICT enhanced learning and the teaching and learning environment. I will also invite you to read or examine the new directions of ICT in education. This is also another online site that's available for persons to examine. All right, and we can also have a look at some guidelines for open education resources in higher education. I think that these two documents will provide more valuable information on the ICT integration process in schools and are very useful for any institution seeking to introduce ICT education. Okay. I hope that this presentation was helpful, right, and offer some guidance in the creation, in starting in the introduction of ICT in your schools and in the use of open education resources.